And we're live. Welcome to
Woo!
this episode of In the Future, where today's topic, as you've already read by looking at the title of this video, is there a social media epidemic? I think the answer is kind of obvious, right? We probably both feel like it's true. I don't think there's anybody who doesn't feel like that's not true. Maybe there is, though. Maybe there is. And we'll touch on both positive and negative impacts, but for those who don't really know what that means, ultimately it refers to the widespread and sometimes detrimental effects of excessive social media usage. Think you're probably scrolling in your bathroom, you're sitting in that toilet a little bit too long, you are postponing things that are pretty important because you're on the couch scrolling through Instagram for the 50th time, or it could be Reddit, right? Not just the obvious ones, it could be Reddit. There's just all levels of digital addiction. And while there are some positive impacts of those things, Max, I think generally there's some highly negative aspects to it. So the question that I would ask you first to start with this topic is, knowing that there's a majority or a major negative effect, can we return to a world that doesn't have the social media platforms that we have today easily? And can you personally do that? Be okay with having everybody disconnect from social media?
Mm,
It's harder than hard. It'd be a hard world to navigate immediately, at least.
do you believe there was a social media, maybe in a different format, prior to, I don't know, Facebook?
MySpace, Zanga.
Okay.
Yeah, I.
Were those as detrimental to society?
That's a great question because that brings up two things actually in my head. Number one, those two social media platforms that you mentioned, or the ones that I mentioned that you're referring to, were pre the smartphone. So there were apps on the phone that you can access it, but just the speed and the return on spending your time on trying to navigate it was just, there was no return on it. It was just painful to navigate. So I wonder if that mitigated people from staying on it for a long time, and it wasn't as accessible everywhere. Number two, the other second thing that I'm thinking of is, like, maybe those social media platforms were not designed to be as addictive as the more modern ones, right? Where it's so much more accessible. And we start to introduce things like the infinite scroll, which is highly one of the inventions of social media that's made it very addicting, as well as the like buttons, right? Those two factors, or some sort of engagement button, like heart, whatever they are, across all of them. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's one of those two things. And we're not going to remove the smartphone, I don't think. Although there's been some movement around using a minimal phone, but maybe it's a design change, a design kind of philosophy that made those less addictive as well.
Okay, interesting. So three points to tackle. So, and also just going back to your original statement. So, if before we call it an epidemic, I think it's important to actually define, like, what is an epidemic, right?
Yeah.
So how is epidemic defined? Merriam-Webster, first thing comes up. An outbreak of disease that spreads quickly and affects many individuals at the same time. I think that's pretty spot on,
That's
right?
$100%.
It's the virality of it. It's how quickly does it infect one person before jumping to another person, and then it continues to spread throughout that community. I think it checks the box for an epidemic. So, in that basic definition regard, I agree. It is an epidemic, and it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't discriminate against how you look. It doesn't discriminate against your age. I guess up to a certain point, like, people under 13 technically shouldn't be accessing it, but
Yeah.
I would say that just by simply having the tablet or phone, like, yeah, even as a 7-year-old in your hand,
Hmm.
that person is already being trained to just have this device at all times, right? So, like, even if they're doing a very, their parents are being responsible and they're just giving them the phone just to access for games and whatnot, they're on their way there. So they're
Easily.
slowly being developed into these little addicts that the rest of us have become.
And it's starting early
Um,
too. It's starting very early. So even
yeah,
before the age of 13, right? There's probably versions of kids social media, like some sort of like, hey, sign up for Nickelodeon.com
Mhm.
and get
I,
badges, beat your friends.
yeah, like the gamification of it. Absolutely. I would also take that one step further and say, like companies like Facebook or Meta, they are really pushing to have free internet in developing countries. That might seem nice and genuine,
Positive,
but
yeah.
you also have to think about it. When you have Facebook as your homepage on a browser, and Facebook is the one who's blessing you with their free internet so you can access all these things like education and entertainment and whatnot, your affinity towards Facebook is just so much tighter, so much
Mm-hmm.
stronger, right? So you um, are almost more likely to become more addicted as your time and engagement with that platform continues.
Yeah.
I won't completely eliminate the benefits though, right? Like you do get access to education, which
Yeah.
may benefit your life and improve your life in a lot of different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now let me go back to the other 3 points that you made. So number one, I totally agree with you that there were social media platforms before the advent of the phone, the iPhone coming out.
Yeah.
I think that is a very key difference, though. It was how much time you have access. How much time do you have to access this platform throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month? And if you're only limited to your desktop or laptop device, you're kind of that's it, right? You're not doing it in the bathroom. You're not doing it on the train. You're not doing it on the go. You're just limited to these hour blocks of the day. So that's very important. It's what's your exposure to this virus,
Yeah.
right? So I think that's a very true point. I don't see us going in the opposite direction and getting rid of the phone. If anything, it's going to become much more almost embedded, right? You're gonna wear
Glasses.
let's say the glasses whenever those come around, or the implants whenever those come around. But none of these companies are going to just say, you know, we've ruined these people a little too much.
It's hard.
Let's try to backpedal. Not going to happen. And then to your second point, I also fully agree. These companies have learned, and first of all, they learned to hire behavioral psychologists, all of those people who really understand this stuff, who really, it's the same game. It's the same playbook that pharmaceutical companies have been using for years. Is how do you get people addicted to this thing, and then how do you tweak it to make sure that maybe they're what's their withdrawal going to be like what do we need to do with them to really perfect this medicine. And so yeah, I think over time it became more of a problem because these companies have perfected the addiction, and that's huge.
Yeah.
Right. And then I'm not sorry for taking up all the airspace, but
Do it. Yeah.
And then to your last point, I think this is where you were going by saying the minimal phone. If you're talking about this trend that I have sort of been following as well, it's people, millennials, but also Gen Z, getting very interested in the basic phone, right? The phone that we all used to have, the dumb phone, right?
Yeah.
If you just, I was having this conversation with somebody a couple of weeks ago. If you just Google trend, basic phone or dumb phone, it's really going up.
Right.
And it's interesting, and it's interesting for several reasons. One, I think there's a real exhaustion, a mental exhaustion with how much, with how prevalent these social media platforms have become part of our lives. It's not just something that you sort of go to once in a while. It's just always there, always on, always in your mind. You're always getting triggered by the beeps and the dings from your phone. And so I think people, I certainly feel this way. And I also just don't use social media that much at all anymore.
Same.
People and quite a few of my friends have sort of, they're slowly uninstalling Instagram. They're uninstalling other apps because you don't really walk away feeling that great from it. A lot of the time, especially when something political happens that kind of just takes over the airwaves, and you can't escape it unless you just don't go on the platforms at all. So I do think that there's this really interesting almost regression to the basic phone. Um, so we'll see what happens. I'll stop there. But as TikTok has shown us, the formula for social media really can be perfected, and they have
Insane.
they have done it better than anyone in history. As we talked about on another episode, it's because of how little time there is between each video clip.
Insane.
Um,
Insane
but
how they perfected that. It's almost a work of
yeah,
art.
it is. It
Honestly.
really is. Aside from the like villain aspect of it, the
Yeah.
villainous aspect of it, it really is. You have to respect the strategy, the work of art, the marketing
That's,
people who went
that's
into it, the
insane.
behavioral research that went into it. Kind of fascinating.
Yeah, yeah, some evil. That's some evil art right there, man. Definitely. That's it's crazy. I mean, just think about it. Like I've dabbled in it just to see what the experience is like, and I'm not a TikToker at all. Like I don't follow anybody. I have the app on my phone to be in tune with what's, how it works and who's on it and how it's used. But I'm on it maybe like once a week for like 5 minutes, just because maybe a friend sent a video. But the thing is, it's like, it's basically, to me, here's how I would describe that particular app. It feels like the next generation TV more than YouTube. Like, well, like let's say we had like our broadcasting TV and cable, we had YouTube. TikTok is like, let's take the aspects of TV and just and of course Instagram has reels and it had the stories before, but TikTok randomly shows you, like, you don't even have to select or look for things. It just understands it. So you literally can veg out on TikTok the way you would with TV. Like, I can sit with TikTok and let it run and it could show me things for hours. Like, I would never even get off of it. So you're taking the addictive attributes of the endless scroll and it becomes just the endless video. And like you said, it's got the perfect timing where it's like right before you get too bored, it hits you with that dopamine again, and you're like, oh, cool. And it also has the element of surprise. You don't know what you're going to get next. Like, oh, I can't wait. I might find that one great video that I'm going to share with my friends. And it's just, yeah, it's insane, man. It's insane. As a consumer of TikTok, dude, that is so crazy to me that we've gotten to this point. And I mean, kids that use it don't know. Like, they're not consciously aware of, like, not all of them. I'm sure there are some, but like a lot of kids are like, yeah, you guys are just being old. Like, this is what we do. This is how we communicate. TikTok it's a present. It has no impact on you. The same way like TV did for us. Like, I'm sure old people, like our generation before us, looked at us watching TV and going on the internet. Mainly TV is like, it's the dumb box. Like, what are you doing? You're literally sitting in front of a light bulb for hours. Like, why are you? And for us growing up, that was kind of the norm. And actually, I'm reading a book right now. So if anybody wants to read it, who's listening to this or watching this, is called Stolen Focus. It's a new book. I think it came out in the last year. And Stolen Focus talks about how they've done a study in the last 40 years, from radio to TV to internet to mobile phone to social media, and how our attention span, like, all of us basically have a version of ADD now. It's like our attention span went from like 30 seconds or a minute. I think it was like a minute before. Then the TV came out and it became like 30 seconds. Again, these aren't the actual numbers. I'm just giving you an example how relative to one another it is. After the TV came out, then the phones came out and it became even less. And I think with social media now, like, our attention span is like, the average attention span, I think it's like 15 seconds or something, like 20 seconds. And I think TikTok really exploited that. And the other thing is, like, even tasks, like, it's impacted the way people do tasks. Like, when you go to work and you try to focus on one task, people can't even focus on a single task anymore for more than X amount of time because of the nature of all of this media and noise and the stimulation that we're so used to. So it's crazy. Like, we're talking about TikTok as if like we're not affected, but we're also, I mean, like, not that we're not affected, but like, we have to admit, even our generation has been impacted by things that even existed before us, and it's probably only going to get worse. But who knows? Like you said, yeah, the movement, the dumb phone movement, might happen.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, again, I don't think the dumb phone or the basic phone movement is actually going to catch on. It's just it's almost that it's becoming popular because it's popular to, it's like virtue signaling, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's popular because people on social media are saying, now I'm done with this Facebook. I'm done with social media. I'm done with Instagram. I'm switching to this dumb phone. But you're talking about it on this platform, and then either like 24 hours will go by and you'll get right back on it because you need that dopamine hit, right? It's not just you're looking at pretty pictures. You are feeling something, right? There's a chemical that actually gets released, right? It's the dopamine cycle that happens, and it's very strong. It's very powerful, and younger people, but also millennials, right? Like Gen Z, millennials. What am I trying to say here? It's a very powerful thing. Some people are aware of it, but even those who are aware of it aren't. It's not constantly top of mind, right? You're not thinking, "Oh, I'm being infected with this thing," because you're not taking a pill, right? You're not taking a pill and you're waiting for an effect. You're just playing around with an innocent phone. To your point and the point of stolen focus, fully agree. And it's very detrimental to society and relationships. I have observed time and time again, people just cannot be in the moment anymore. If you are watching TV, you could turn and you could see your partner on their phone, scrolling through social media. Okay, so you're not really with the person you're with. You're not even really paying attention to the activity that you're watching. You're multitasking, and then you're at work and you got your phone going off. You've got, I mean, look, even when you were getting set up for this recording, you said I have a ton of crap on my monitors, right? That's open right now. We have all these tabs, everything that's open, just like distracting from us. I have, the different forms of Slack or Teams or Instant Messenger, just like begging for our attention. Every time that phone goes off, it's somebody needing something from you, right? And you just go and you answer like a good little, like a loyal servant, like no relationship in our life is as powerful as our connection to the phone. And so I think we're just multitasking so much more these days, and as a result we're doing everything a little bit worse. We're paying attention a little bit less to the activities that we're doing, and as a result the output is just it's worse, right? It's not as good as it used to be. So it'll be interesting to see really what happens, but social media is it's one of those things, you let the genie out of the bottle. You can't put toothpaste back in the tube.
So that's so kind of to the kind of we're in the future, right? That's our, in the context of that, like, so what do? Do we fight against it? Are we just aware the same way we've been aware of like cigarettes being unhealthy, or do we treat it like alcohol, like social media is a good treat and just I need to be aware, or do we just give in and go with the flow because there's no turning back? Like augmented reality we talked about at the beginning, and once we go there, it's going to be 24/7. I'll probably have a feed in my vision almost always, like in the corner of my eye, like, oh, a post. Huh? Sorry, I was talking. Realistically, that's what it'll be. It'll be me talking to you in this podcast or conversation, and you'll see me do this. Oh, sorry. Somebody. I just saw a funny video in my post. Sorry, man. So, what were you saying? Like that? Oh my gosh, it's gonna be terrible. I mean, terrible from maybe we're old men, but I think objectively, it's going to be harmful for sure for relationships.
It's interesting, right? Because it's no longer binary. You can't just turn it off or turn it on. The discussion that's been ongoing forever in government is, okay, let's regulate it. How are you going to regulate it?
It's the only way, by the way. It's the only way that I can think of would be regulation, though.
But what even is regulation, right? Like, how is the government going to regulate anything that any of these social media platforms truly do at the pace that everything evolves on the technology side compared to the snail pace that anything moves in government?
100%.
Those forces are always going to clash. And
not in our government, it won't work. I'll tell you that much. But it does seem like Europe is trying. And by the way, I'm not saying it's the right move to do. It's like, it's also at the risk of economic suppression, I think. Like a lot of our economy, right? or a big chunk of it is from the tech sector, the advertising sector, and a lot of that. I mean, most of that online is it's social media. It's just Google, Meta, and Amazon, and then maybe some random banner ads. But that's really most of that. If you put regulation on that, the level of like just income for these companies will just crash. So it's do we want that? I mean, Europe is doing it, right? Like Europe is actually regulating. They've got GDPR. I mean, we have the California one as well, but I think they're a lot more strict, and I think they are actually trying to take action on this. But again, there are more socialist type of countries where maybe, I don't know, maybe their governments work more efficient. I don't know because I don't live there or work with their government, but probably not, honestly, because all government has a lot of red tape.
Yeah, no way. There's really only two ways. You can, you can be very forceful with information flow, right? Like China, let's say, or Russia. They're very capable of controlling the information that their citizens see. Or you could be more like the United States, just
let it flow.
Let it flow. See what happens. We kind of see the consequences of it now.
Yeah,
what I think,
news.
or like fake news. So you bring me to my next point. So I think that the real future problem of this social media is something that you and I touched on a couple of times. So if you think about information flow, where do most of us get our news these days? It's no longer on TV. Nobody tunes in on to NBC or CBS or ABC. They go to Facebook. They go to TikTok.
Reddit. I go to Reddit.
They go to Reddit, which is like a whole other.
I know. Trust me, I know it's bad. But
if anything, it's a little bit more elevated intelligence-wise, right? Like, right. Okay, there's some people who are a little bit off the, a little bit out of left field on some of the topics there, and it really is like it attracts a lot of conspiracy theories and things like that.
100%.
But it's information flow, right? And my biggest concern for the future of news is the very visible decline of people watching these actual TV networks to get their news. And where are those people going? They're all going to social media. Okay. So now if we know that social media is such a big threat in terms of, I'm just going to put it in big quotes, fake news, right? Fake news is just unverified news. It doesn't mean that it's completely fabricated. It's just, it's written as clickbait. Most people don't even click on the article and read it. They just share it with their friends or they repost it with their friends, and that's how it goes viral, right? And one of my biggest concerns for the future is we're going to start seeing almost mini media networks, right? Like, let's say you have a following and you want to talk about politics. All of a sudden you have your own news channel where you are just spewing any kind of news with zero regulation, and you have a following, and
Alex
people
Jones.
are. And exactly, and people are soaking it up and they're resharing it, right? And if you get hundreds of those people or thousands of those people that have their own little followings in the corner of the web, that's dangerous, right? Because news for a really long time used to be vetted. It used to be vetted, and
networks too.
Have
the networks fallen off of that though? I don't know.
The networks fell off as soon as advertisers became part of the equation, and it was no longer public broadcasting, the way like radio used to be, things like that. It really became, how do we please the advertiser, right? We don't want to say anything too controversial on the news, and then Fox came out, and they just completely flipped the paradigm, which was another interesting thing.
So do you think, and maybe this is not to veer off too much, would you say a network like BBC, which is government owned or public, in the UK, would you say that would be a more legit source of news that still exists today? Because PBS is way underfunded versus like a BBC. It's respected.
To be honest, man, respected, yes. I respect real journalists who go through the vetting process, who have an actual editor, who have red teams, that can read things with an open eye and just kind of. It's a little bit more balanced, a little bit more fair. I don't know about BBC specifically, or like someone like The Guardian, right? Yeah. Like they pride themselves on being unbiased, but everyone's biased, right? Yeah. Inherently, your people are biased. Algorithms that are created by human beings have that inherent bias already baked in, right? So, and then again, like talking about information flow, if we're gonna in the future be getting most of our answers and information from things like ChatGPT, those were programmed by people,
By
right? So
people, yeah.
there's always going to be a slant that's built in, and you have to understand who the people are, right? It's usually white men,
Hmm.
right? For a really long time, that's how it's been, and so how long until we untangle ourselves from that particular bias? But I think a bias will always exist,
Hmm.
and it's going to be a very interesting world. One of the things that one of the points that I wanted to make for how I see social media changing in the future, I think people. I think there's two interesting points. People are going to, number one, no longer be okay with giving away their data for free.
Because
I
they're more
think I
aware,
think
yeah.
I think they're
The
more
value.
aware of how it's being used, but more importantly, once it becomes popular and people see, okay, my data I could charge, 10 cents per kilobyte or megabyte of
Hmm.
whatever data. Yeah, but if over a month, all of, like if you're someone that advertisers are interested in, $10 a week, $100 a month, $100 a year,
This,
right? Like how much do people need just to say, yeah, do whatever you want with my data, just pay me a little bit for it?
yeah, yeah.
That's another interesting
That's not a bad
bridge that
business
we're going to
model.
cross.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah.
Because your
Uh,
return on investment will still be huge. I mean, it's, advertisers will pay so much for that.
yeah.
From another angle of the future, I wonder now, what is your take on including it as part of an educational like curriculum in schools, like
For
having
it.
digital literacy? Like, hey,
Mhm.
kids, as you get older, you know what? It's funny. Now that I just mentioned it, I remember I went back to my junior high school like 2 3 years ago, or was it like, yeah, it was like 3 years ago, 4 years ago. I went back to my junior high school because a friend of mine was a teacher at the school, and she's like, "Can you come speak to these kids?" As like career day, basically, right? So I
Really?
went,
I didn't know
yeah.
this.
So I went there, and I'm seeing all my old teachers and everything. They're like, "Well," I'm like, first of all, I'm surprised they even remember me. And I was like and the way they saw me too was like they saw me yesterday. They're like, "Oh, Spencer, hey, how's it going? Like, what are you doing here?" I'm like, dude, I haven't seen you in 15 years. Really? You're crazy. Like my band teacher. But anyway, so I got in front of the classroom a couple of times, and I remember because they asked me what I did, and I remember just saying, and for those who don't know, I work in marketing and advertising and digital technology, and I started talking to these kids exactly about this. Like I was telling them, like, hey, just understand that your information that you give out online is very valuable. So, like, I literally was telling them, everything that we do, we're tracking you online. You should be very much aware. And they were all like, really? Like, what? I didn't know that. Like, so it's interesting. That's also interesting to them as a topic because this is their world. They're on
Mhm.
TikTok. They're playing games online, which is also tracking you. And I think that as a curriculum, that should probably be the norm. It'll probably take a while, as you said, like especially in public schools to really introduce this. But this should be digital literacy of like, hey, your data is important. When you go play, I don't know, Roblox or Minecraft online, be very careful about what you share because it can be leveraged for A, B, and C. I think that's going to be, and also prioritizing digital well being. Like, don't post things that you know will be used against you. Nude photos, maybe not the smartest things. I know it's embarrassing when you guys are teenagers. Don't take photos of your bodies. That's probably not a great idea. Those that type of things are probably things we should start teaching, and maybe some schools are doing it now. But I think that's important for the future.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I fully agree. It's and there's no reason why public schools would be against this, right? If
Zero.
anything, it's such a huge harm, even for teachers, right?
Yeah.
Like teachers are just watching their kids constantly be on their phones. Like, hey, Michael, put your phone away.
Yeah.
Put your phone away. I just told you 3 times. Okay, give me your phone.
Yeah.
And then the kid just throws a tantrum. And that's kind of how it goes these days. I fully agree with you. I think that topics like digital responsibility is as important to teach in schools as how to file your taxes.
Yep.
how to do
100%.
how to do the Heimlich maneuver, how to save yourself if you're choking at home, do the Heimlich maneuver on yourself,
Yeah.
right? These are very important things that are just never taught in schools.
Yeah.
No idea why.
It arguably, in my opinion, sometimes, and I'm saying, I'm not, again, nothing against this topic, but more than, let's just say, like advanced like an algebra that's really advanced, right? Like, I think those topics are important too to understand, but like really advanced math, like these are some baselines that before we can even get there, these should be taught. You know?
Yeah, I agree. The problem, so like one of the things you mentioned is, you should be careful for this and watch for this. To me, the problem is they just it's twofold. It's sort of like you're going backpacking through, you go through a forest. You don't know what berries to eat or like
Yeah.
which sticks not to step on because they're soaked wood and they're gonna break underneath you. You just don't know what you don't know, and you don't know. You hear the words, but they don't register until a really long time in the future. Um, one of the things that I hope for and I believe will be the next step in social media is what kind of think about a dial, right? And I think people are gonna be. Let me rephrase this in a more intelligent way. I think one of the forms of regulation that will get passed once government is involved, is more deeply involved with social media, is it will allow citizens a dial that they can turn to control the bias of the information flow that they want to see. So right now, your basic the real danger with social media is that people are in a bubble of their own choosing. It's whatever topic you're into, but then it just gives you more of that information and it solidifies that bubble for you, and it grows the bubble with more people who are like-minded like you, instead of giving you other opinions from other points of views. I think some people who are interested in other points of views and don't just want to be reaffirmed about what they already believe. I think those people, like me, like you, they're gonna say, I want to turn this dial a little bit. I don't want to be far left or far right. I want to be somewhere a little bit closer to the center, or like, and you can sort of change that scale. And now all of a sudden, the information flow that's coming towards you, or that's coming to you, is far different, right? And you could say, okay, just like ChatGPT, right? Like, did you like this information? Yes, no. Was it better or worse, right? And sort of course correcting what you're getting on all of these feeds. That is one of the only ways that I could see the real danger of social media being addressed. And it's so, like, the ultimate goal is we need to get people out of their own bubbles, because the danger right now is crystal clear, right? People no longer are able to have a conversation with each other, not simply because they're just looking at their device and they forgot how to speak to one another, but it's the facts that we have are no longer shared, right? Your information is very different from my information, and so people just end up clashing, right? Butting heads, because what you're saying sounds like nonsense to me because I have never heard that information in my life. And so I think responsible regulation from the government should allow that dial and almost force Facebook and all of these companies and TikTok to say, hey, let the user decide what he wants to see, what direction he wants to go in. Don't block off one avenue just because that person said that that's what they're interested in. Give them some choice. Give that back.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a great futuristic idea. The knob, because then it's like you're acknowledging, and I got to go in 3 minutes, and I actually think we're over anyway. But I love that idea because it also, you self acknowledge that you're being biased. It's like it's just a little bit of like a conscious check. But yeah, man, we're out of time, and I do have to run to a meeting as well in a second.
One more thing. So Google actually has something similar to it now, where you can see what Google knows about you. I don't know if you've
I've seen it, your whole profile, and it has all the topics you can switch on and off.
Exactly. And so that's a form of a dial, right? They're getting a little bit ahead of it and kind of giving people, this is why we serve you the content that we do. It's because we believe these things about you. Are they true or are they false? Course correct. I think something like that is what we're going to see, and I hope we're going to see in the future.
Yeah, less nice.
Okay, go ahead.
I was going to say less of a black box, that's all.
Yes.
Awesome. Well,
good one. I like this one.
Sounds good. Yeah, this was great. This is In the Future, episode 6, and we'll catch you next time.